How to know if your boyfriend is husband material. Part 1. Whether you've been on the asking, receiving, or the observing end of this question, almost everyone has heard it. How did you know your spouse was the one? And by the one, whoever was asking probably meant the one who wouldn't drive you insane after 3 years of marriage. It's a scary thing, joining your life with someone, potentially taking their name, joining a bank account, beginning a family with that person. It takes a ton of trust. To some, saying yes, or I do, should be the easiest decision you should ever have to make. To others, it might be the scariest and most overwhelming choice ever. I had a few boyfriends before I met Josh. Each relationship lasted relatively long as far as young relationships go. I've always been a fan of commitment. And when we were dating, I saw myself marrying each one of those guys. Or at least I tried to. I realize not everyone is that way. My personality type tends to only form a few strong attachments instead of many, more casual ones. So I understand that everyone views and handles dating differently. My point is, almost each time I dated someone, I could potentially see myself marrying them. So what was different about the one I actually married? Maturity. Josh and I were practically babies when we started dating. We were both 18 and fresh out of high school into college. But even at that age, I knew that Josh could take life seriously. Don't get me wrong, to this day he's a huge dork, and we totally quote Parks and Rec at just about every opportunity we get. But he also loved, and loves, to talk about serious things too. Even at that point in his life, he already understood his principles and values, which helped him determine where he stood on most issues. Because of that, he didn't look to me to find any sort of identity, worth, or opinions. That is so important. He already knew what he believed, and he wasn't going to change that depending on who he dated. So, fortunate for us, many of our beliefs and principles matched up nicely, and we found that we had a lot in common that way. This isn't to say that flexibility and openness of mind isn't important. We'll get to that later. But before you marry someone, or even get too involved in any kind of serious-ish relationship, be sure to try to understand their worldview. Although you may not agree on all topics, if you and your mate have similar worldviews, most of the time you'll be able to agree, or at least understand where the other person is coming from, which is essential to the healthy, cohesive relationship that we all want. Purpose. At first, when I was outlining this post, this point was going to be titled Direction. But then I realized that Josh had almost no specific direction when we met, and a lot of guys who are at the age of considering marriage are still trying to find or establish themselves in a career. So instead of direction, I chose to title this point Drive. And then I thought, no, that's not right, either. Don't get me wrong. Drive is really important. But a man can feel extremely driven in his career and also feel purposeless and depressed, which will inevitably affect his entire life. We don't want that. So after nixing my first two ideas, this point is called Purpose. I chose purpose because, as I said before, a man can have all the drive in the world, but if he feels like his job has no purpose, he will often be dissatisfied with it. But drive is extremely important also. Although many wives and moms choose to work, like I did even after our son was born, a man has a responsibility to work and provide for his family's financial security. That doesn't happen without drive. Even if a man doesn't necessarily have himself established in a career yet, if he has a drive to provide, he will find a way to do that. Purpose is so important, because your husband will know why he gets up every day and goes to work. It will be more than just bringing home a paycheck twice a month. He'll love what he does, and will be happier in the long run. Choosing a job that provides your husband with purpose will not always be the highest paying, but it will be the most satisfying to the both, if you and beneficial to your future together. Humility. While I think all the points on this list are important, this one is essential on so many different levels. Your significant other's level of humility will affect how they act and react to so many different situations. How does he treat the server at the restaurant where you're eating? How does he respond if or when you bring up an issue to him? Does he immediately become defensive, or does he listen? Is he always telling you it's your turn to do something? If so, he may be struggling with selfishness or pride, which is an issue we all need to deal with, but if not dealt with, can be poisonous to a marriage. I talk about selfishness much more in depth here, in one of my most popular posts. Like I said, this is something that every human being is going to struggle with, but the willingness to work on it and improve is what makes all the difference. This will be especially difficult these days, when we are constantly told to love ourselves first and take care of ourselves first. I think accepting who you are, being confident, and taking care of yourself is important, but I completely disagree with the notion that you can't take care of others before you take care of yourself. Love isn't always convenient, and it doesn't always leave you full. It can be draining. And people these days are terrified of that for some reason. But pouring yourself out for someone else can sometimes be the most noble thing a person can do. Sorry for that mini sermon there, but the self-love movement can really get me going sometimes. So you might be thinking, okay, marry a guy who's humble. Got it. But what does humble mean, exactly? Well, Merriam-Webster defines humble as, not proud, not thinking of yourself as better than other people. Usually, if we take that sort of mindset, it will allow us to give another the benefit of the doubt, and consequently enable us to be kinder, gentler, and more understanding to others. If you want a man who does that for you, find yourself a humble one. Uniqueness. I have 3 younger sisters, and 1 younger sister-in-law, all of whom are involved in different aspects of the dating scene. I've had sisters date great guys and lame ones. But for the lame ones, I often hear the excuse, "He's a really nice guy, though." And then I say, so? As if that's any kind of reason to date and possibly consider marrying someone. I know there are a lot of icky guys out there, but there are also a whole lot of nice guys. So what? Because this guy isn't disgusting and mean, that means he's good to date and have a serious relationship with. Not to me, it isn't. I dated a nice guy once. And he was super nice. But that's about it. There was absolutely no depth to our relationship. We got along well, he was a gentleman, we had fun. But I honestly found myself bored with him. But for that, I felt so awful. Here was this perfectly good guy, who would be a great boyfriend to anyone, he treats me like a princess, but the whole relationship is just kinda. There was nothing about our relationship that inspired me, challenged me, or complimented me. He was nice, I was nice. And that was it. All this to say, if you're dating someone and wondering if they could be the one for you, ask yourself, what makes him different from anyone else? Does he have any qualities that I couldn't live without if I dated another person? I've mentioned this before in other posts, but my husband and I are very similar in some ways, and extremely different in other ways. Oddly enough, we are both major introverts. But I am a much more of a feeling kind of person, and he is, as he likes to say, more rational, which can some days cause arguments, but overall we are extremely helpful and complementary to each other's personalities. At times, I need to remind him that not every problem can be solved with logic, and he reminds me that going with my gut isn't always the best. Finding a person who is unique from you and other nice guys out there is essential to a vibrant and constructive relationship. People say, just because it's on sale, doesn't mean you need to buy it, but I'll say this, just because a guy is nice, doesn't mean you should date him.